Hello, this is Patrick at OneCNCWest, and what we're going to do in this video is create this solid model. Now, we're going to be using something called hybrid modeling. Hybrid modeling uses a combination of surfaces and solid model features to create the final part, the final solid model. Now, in this example, I think what we'll do is we'll start creating this geometry at the very top. We're going to be using different layers that have different dimensions for us that will walk us through step by step. So again, let's start by creating this geometry at the very top of the part. Alright, so let's turn our print layer on. That way we can see the dimensions that we're going to be using. I'm going to hit the spacebar twice to quickly go to a CAD view. And why don't we turn the solid model layer off? I'll head back over into the layer browser and simply just click on the little eye there next to solid model. Just a simple left click. Alright, so for this shape, why don't we create these two circles first? The first circle is going to have a radius of 1 inch, and the second circle is going to have a radius of 1 inch 250 thousandths. Now, both of these circles are located at x0, y minus 1.8. Alright, so let's turn our print layer off. I'm going to just highlight this layer I've called create part, and that way any geometry we create on this layer we can easily compare to our print layer to make sure that we're right on track. Alright, let's create our circles. We'll head over to the command manager, select our arc tools, and we're going to use the circle command. Now the diameter is going to be 2 inches because remember the first circle has a radius of 1 inch. That's going to be located at x0, and the y value is going to be minus 1 inch 800 thousandths. Very good, so let's click OK, and then now we can hit the escape key on the keyboard, and there we go. There's our very first circle. Now we can compare this to our print layer by turning our print layer on and off, and that looks like we're right on track. Alright, again I'll hit the spacebar twice, quickly go to a CAD view. Let's go back into our command manager. Again we'll select the circle tool, and this next circle is going to have a diameter of 2 inches 500 thousandths. Now of course you can type that in, or if you want to, you could type in a formula. For example, we know that the radius is 1 inch 250 thousandths times 2, and then hit the equal sign on the keyboard, and OneCNC will calculate the formula for us. Alright, so there we go. We have a diameter of 2 inches 500 thousandths. We can use coordinate input, but we don't need to. We can take our cursor and simply snap the center of the existing circle. You'll know you're at the center when you see that little diamond. Just left click, and when you're done, you can hit the escape key on the keyboard. Alright, so there's our two circles. Let's compare that with our print, and that looks great. Now, why don't we create the lines next? In fact, we could actually create a rectangle for this. The rectangle is going to be 500 thousandths by 3 inches 600 thousandths. So let's do that. Let's create the rectangle. Again, I'll turn our print layer off, head back into the command manager, and now we're going to use our line tool set. Let's select rectangle. Now when creating a rectangle, you're going to be defining two opposing diagonal corners. I think for the first corner, let's put that at x0, y0, z0. So I'll simply click OK to that. Now for the length, we know that's a ½ inch. So I'm going to type in 500 thousandths. And for the height, let's type in minus 3 inches 600 thousandths. I think that looks great, so let's click the OK button. And then if we want to, we can hit the escape key on the keyboard, or you can right hand mouse click. Very good. Let's quickly compare this to our print layer. I'm going to turn our print layer on and off, and I think everything looks good. Now let's trim this up. To trim this, I'm going to be using the scissor command. Scissor command is very easy in that all you have to do is just select the geometry you want to get rid of. Now you can use the shortcut, which is the letter X on the keyboard, to go into the scissor command, or you can head back over to the command manager, go into your trim tools, and you'll notice scissors at the very top. Alright, so again, all you need to do is just left click the geometry you want to get rid of. So I'm just going to left click, left click, left click, and left click. I'm going to do the same on the inside here with a left click, and left click. And when we're done, again, you can hit the escape key on the keyboard, or you can right hand mouse click. Hey, let's compare our geometry now to our print layer. I'm going to turn the print layer on and off, and I think everything looks great. Alright, now let's work on the next set of geometry, which we can find on our print 2 layer. Now, if we were to zoom out just a little bit, and let's pan up, you can see that this feature we're creating is actually 600 thousandths thick. So what we're going to do is we're going to be creating some new geometry here, and this new geometry is also 600 thousandths offset from the geometry we just created. In other words, we're going to be creating geometry that's offset 600 thousandths from this edge right here. Alright, so I think the best way to do this would be to select our geometry that we've already created, make a copy of it, and move it down 600 thousandths, and then we'll create that offset geometry. Now we can do that easily just by doing this. I'm going to hit Control A, Control Alpha on the keyboard, and that's because before you can move something, before you can rotate or scale, you need to select it first. And if you hit Control A, Control Alpha on your keyboard, it will select everything. Once the geometry is selected, we can come up here and select our Move Copy command. Here's your Move command. That will not make a copy. Here's your Move and Copy command, so we want to use that one. Now we're going to be moving this down incrementally down in Z minus 600 thousandths. If you don't see your incremental input, just left click on the plus ink button and that will expand the dialog to where you'll have your incremental options. So I'm going to type in minus 0.6 to make a copy of that geometry and move it down minus 600 thousandths. I think that looks great, so I'm going to click OK to that, and when we're done we can hit the escape key on the keyboard. Alright, now we no longer need to have this upper geometry selected, so we can quickly deselect that by clicking that button there. Alright, so now let's create that offset geometry that's going to be offset from this lower level at 600 thousandths. To do that, let's go back to the command manager and let's select our shapes option. From there, we're going to use this option called advanced offset. For offset distance, I already have 600 thousandths typed in here. Side of arrow simply means that the offset's going to occur on the side of the arrow that we select. Let me demonstrate how this works. We're going to click OK. I'm going to left click the beginning of the geometry that I want to offset, and these arrows represent the side of the offset, and they also represent the direction of selection. I want to select in this direction, so that's the arrow I want to select. I'm going to left click that, and then my cursor changes to the word end. I can now left click the end of the geometry that I want to offset, and when I'm done I can right hand mouse click to tell OneCNC that we're finished. Once we do that, OneCNC prompts us to see if we want to continue offsetting. I don't, so I'm going to click no here, and that's it. There's our offset geometry. Alright, now we no longer need this geometry here along that edge, so I'm going to hit the letter S on the keyboard, left click, left click, left click, and left click. Hit the delete key. There we go. And now we can trim the geometry that we have down here by hitting the letter T on the keyboard. The letter T is the shortcut for trim 1. In fact, let me show you where that's at. We head over to our command manager, select our trim tools. Notice there's an option called trim 1 and trim 2, and the shortcuts are listed over here on the right. So T will put you into the trim mode. I want to trim that shape to that shape. I want to trim that shape to that shape. Alright, this is looking good. All we need to do now is create those 1/4 inch fillets in those 4 corners. So let's do that next. So let's head back over to the command manager, select our arc tools, and from there we're going to find our fillet command. For fillet, let's make that 250 thousandths. So I'm going to type in 0.25. That looks good, and all we need to do now is select the geometry where we'd like to create the fillets. To do that, we're just going to left click and left click, left click and left click. That looks great. I'm going to rotate around just a little bit. Left click and left click, left click and left click, and there we go. There is our geometry. Now it's time to create the surfaces. Now there's 2 types of surfaces we're going to be using. We're going to be using cross-sectional surfaces and surface from curves. Let's first take a look at cross-sectional surfaces. Cross-sectional surfaces are surfaces very much like stretching material from one shape to another. So if I were to select this line and this line, a surface is going to be created or stretched between these 2 shapes. Now, one line of thought is to select all of the upper geometry, select all of the lower geometry, and then let OneCNC create the cross-sectional surfaces. You can do that, but OneCNC is going to take an approximation of all this wireframe geometry to create that resultant single cross-sectional surface. If you're going to do that, I would go to Advanced Surface Options and make sure that you have this option called Per Entity. Per Entity is going to give you a much more defined surface at the edges. In fact, when you select Per Entity, it's like you're selecting one shape at a time. However, for this presentation, I'm going to be selecting the geometry one shape at a time, or one group of shapes at a time. Let's take a look at that. We're going to select cross-sectional, and what you do is this. I'm going to be creating the first surface between these two shapes right here. So to do that, I'm going to left click the first shape. Now we have to select the direction. I'm going to left click. Now the cursor changes to the word in because it wants us to select the rest of the geometry, but I'm done. I'm done selecting the shape that I want to use, so I'm going to right click. Now my cursor recycles to the word start, so I'm going to left click the arrow. Cursor changes to the word end. It wants me to select other geometry, but I am finished. So I'm just going to right click one more time. And then now I'm going to right click just one more time to tell OneCNC that I'm completely finished selecting the geometry. Just like that. All right, that looks good. Let's do the same thing here. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. I'm going to left click the arrow, right click the arrow, right click, and right click again. And it's just a matter of repeating this process. Just like this. Now I do want to point something out that's very important. When you select your geometry, when you select the direction, you want to make sure that on the other shape you select the same direction. If I were to select a different direction, for example, click the arrow here, OneCNC is going to twist the surface. It kind of looks like licorice. If I left click and then right click and right click again, you'll see the surface is twisted. So it's very important that you always select the same direction. Okay, let's go back into cross-sectional. I'm going to left click and right click, left click and right click one more time. All right, I'm going to speed the video up just a little bit. I'm just going to repeat the same process, and when I'm finished, I'll come back and we'll take a look at creating surface from curves. All right, so there's our cross-sectional surfaces created, and I think that looks great. All right, now the next type of surface we're going to take a look at is called surface from curves. Now, when you create surface from curves, you need a closed boundary, and that geometry needs to be at the same Z level. All right, so this blue wireframe geometry is a perfect candidate for surface of curves. Same with the blue geometry at the very bottom there. So let's head back over into the command manager. We're going to select our surface from curves. I'm going to left click that boundary, and when I'm finished, I can right click and OneCNC creates the surface. Very, very nice. All right, let's do that again. Back into our surface from curves. We're going to left click that bottom blue wireframe geometry. When we're done, we're going to right click, and if I rotate the view a little bit, you can see there is the brand new surface. Now let's take all of the surfaces that we've created and let's join them into one solid model. The first step is to select all of the geometry. A shortcut is just hit Control A, Control Alpha on the keyboard to select everything. That's exactly like using this option within your selection tools. With the geometry selected, we're going to head back over to the command manager. From there, we're going to select our model operations and we're going to use the merge command. I'm just going to left click. And now you can see we have one solid model. In fact, if I hit the letter S on the keyboard and left click, you can see there we go. We have the solid. All right, I'm going to hit the spacebar twice to quickly go into a CAD view. And let's take a look at the next print, which is print 3. Now this is going to start to create the base of our part. All right, so to show you what we're trying to create here, I'm going to turn all of these layers off. Let's turn our solid layer back on. So essentially what we're doing now is we're going to start creating this geometry, again at the very base of the part. All right, so to do that, I think there's an easy way to do that. In fact, let's go back, turn our print layer back on, and I'll hit the spacebar twice to quickly go into a CAD view. You can see that this edge right here has a parallel distance from the left edge of 4 inches. Let's use the parallel line tool to create this edge. All right, so let's turn our create part layer back on. We don't need to look at the print anymore, so we'll turn our print layer 3 off. Let's head over into the command manager, go into our line tools, and we're going to use parallel offset. And And remember, that parallel offset amount is going to be 4 inches. Very good. All I need to do is select the line at the very bottom here, and I want to be on the right side. You can move your cursor right or left, and that will determine the side that you get the offset, but I want to be on the right, so I'm simply going to just left click there. When I'm done, I can right hand mouse click. Now we can use our trim tools to trim up the remaining boundary here. Instead of using trim 1, I'm going to use an option called trim 2. That allows me to trim 2 entities or 2 shapes at the same time. Again, to get there, you can go to your trim tools and you can use this option right here called trim 2, or you can use the shortcut, which is Control T. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit Control T on the keyboard. I'm going to left click that line, left click that line. I want to trim this line to that line, and notice how both shapes get trimmed. Very, very good. All right, I think this is looking good. Let's turn our print 3 layer back on, and we can see if I hit this spacebar twice, go back to a CAD view, you can see the thickness that we have here is going to be 600 thousandths. So let's do that. Let's extrude that shape that we created 600 thousandths down. All right, so let's turn our print layer off. Very good. And let's head over here to our command manager. We're going to go into our extrude tools, extrude curves. Now, when you use extrude curves, you do need a closed boundary, and we definitely have that at the very bottom. And for the height, I'm going to type in minus 600 thousandths. Very good. All I need to do now is take my cursor, left click, right click, and when I'm done, I can just left click anywhere within the graphics area, and then I can either right hand mouse click to finish or hit the escape key on the keyboard. All right, this looks great, but at the moment, these are 2 separate solid models. If I left click and left click, you can see again they're 2 separate solids. Let's join those together again by using the merge command. So back into the command manager, back into our model operations, and then merge. Very good, so we have a successful solid model created. However, there's something to think about. Remember, before we join these 2 together, this top solid model had a bottom. It had a bottom surface. And when we created this shape, this other solid model, before we joined them, it also had a surface at the very top. So at the moment, there are surfaces still inside here that we really should get rid of. All right? Now, to do that, we can head over to the command manager, and we can use this option called remove inner surfaces. I can now take my cursor, left click, and when I'm done, that has removed the inner surfaces. We can quickly check the integrity of our solid model by heading over to the lower right hand corner and select our verify options. From there, we're going to use this tool here called retrieve information about a solid. I'm going to left click that, take my cursor and left click, and notice it says verify selected object is a solid, and also very important, there's only one region, region 1. If we hadn't removed those inner surfaces, we would have had 2 regions, but we just have region 1. So everything is looking great. All right, let's hit the spacebar twice, quickly go to a CAD view. Let's turn our print layer back on, and let's create this oval here, this oval cutout. It looks like this is made of 2 circles that have a radius of 700 thousandths, and the distance is 2 inches 900 thousandths, and the y distance is minus 1.225. So let's create this circle first. All right, let's head over to the command manager. Let's go into our circle tools, and for that we need to make sure that we change our diameter to 1 inch 400 thousandths. Very good. Now for the coordinate input, we're going to type in 2.9. That looks good. And for the y value, we're going to type in minus 1.225. That looks great. So I'm going to click OK to that. We're going to create one more circle now. I'm going to use the same x value, but I'm going to change the y value now to minus 2.4. Very good. So I'm going to click OK, and I'll hit the escape key on the keyboard. Let's turn our print layer off, and there we go. We have our 2 circles created. All right, now let's create 2 lines that are tangent here on the left and right side. So back into the command manager, go into our line tool, and we're going to use line tangent. I'm going to take my cursor, left click, move down to the lower circle, left click. Now we'll come over here to the right, left click, come up and left click, and when we're done, we can right hand mouse click. Now we can use our trim tools, Control T or T, but why don't we use this scissor command by hitting the letter X? That's the shortcut for scissor. And remember, the scissor command gets rid of what you select. So I'm going to hit the letter X on the keyboard, and all I need to do is simply left click the geometry that I don't want. All right, that's looking great. Now let's use this closed boundary that we just created, and let's cut a hole through our solid model. So back over into the command manager, go into our extrude tools, extrude cut. I'm going to take my cursor and I can left click anywhere on this closed boundary. Then I'm going to take my cursor, drag it down and left click. And when I'm done, you can see that OneCNC has made a nice clean cut all the way through the part. Very, very good. All right, now I'm going to hit the spacebar twice. Again, back to a CAD view. Let's turn our print 4 layer on and see what else we need to create. All right, it looks like there's a couple of chamfers that we need to create, and there's also a fillet on the outside on all 4 corners. In fact, let's turn our part model off. You can see that we have a 1/2 inch fillet here on all 4 corners, and then there's a 125 thousandths chamfer on this edge and on this edge. Why don't we create these 1/2 inch fillets first? So I'm going to turn our print layers off. Let's turn our part layer back on. And to create the fillet, let's head over here to the command manager. Let's select our model tools. From there, we're going to select fillet. And for the fillet amount, we want to use 500 thousandths. So I'm going to select standard fillet. And for the radius, I already have 500 thousandths there. So we'll click OK. And all I need to do now is just select the edges where I'd like to create those 4 fillets. That looks good. We'll right hand mouse click, and you can see OneCNC has created the geometry. Now at this point, if we'd like, we can get rid of that wireframe geometry. We really don't need it anymore. So what I'm going to do is a quick way to select the wireframe geometry is head up to the very top, and within the selection tools, we're going to select by color. And within the color palette, we're going to select everything that's light blue. We'll click OK, and then all I need to do is hit the delete key on the keyboard. All right, our part's almost completed. Let's create these 2 chamfers. All right, let's head over to the command manager. We're going to go back into our fillet tool. This time we're going to select chamfer, and for the chamfer distance, let's make that 125 thousandths. We'll click OK. I'm going to left click that edge and left click the edge at the very top of our oval cutout, and then right hand mouse click. Very good. And it looks like there's just one more detail we need to create. It looks like there's a fillet at the very base here of 250 thousandths that we need to make. So let's create that. Again, back into our fillet tool. We're going to go back into standard fillet. We're going to make this 250 thousandths. That looks good. We'll click OK. I'm just going to left click that bottom edge, right hand mouse click, and let OneCNC generate the fillet. Very nice. All right, that's it for this video. We used hybrid modeling, a combination of surfaces and solid model techniques to create this solid model. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.